Hello, my name is Teodora Trifonova. I'm from Bulgaria, and I am a first-year PhD student in the School of Journalism and Electronic Media at the College of Communication and Information at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. Thank you for having me. My topic of research in progress is identifying a trend of rising verbal and physical violence against journalists globally. As I said to you, this is a topic that I'm still working. I'm still on the part of the introduction and literature review, and I hope soon I will start the method section. I want to conduct this research as a qualitative, in-depth interviews. Let me just share my screen and to talk a little bit more about this topic, why I chose this topic, why I consider this topic important. So first of all, I've been a journalist the last 13 years, a broadcast journalist, working on the field and covering major international news events, not just in Europe, but also here in the US as a special correspondent. In the last few years, I noticed that, you know, there are like higher and higher, it's for me a trend of journalists that have been attacked, you know, during their trying to do their work, just being a journalist on the field, and being attacked from the public due to the narrative of the politics and the mistrust between the media and the public. When I say the narrative of the politics, what I observe is that when here in the US, the politicians are calling the media fake news, in my country, Bulgaria, we are experiencing the same thing. Politicians are calling us fake news as well. So people in the street, when they see you holding a microphone or trying to do your job, they will call you fake news as well. So that's why I'm thinking that this is a pretty important topic of my field of research and journalism in general. So the data that I gathered now, so in 2020, 62 journalists were killed just for doing their job worldwide. Between 2006 and 2020, over 1,200 journalists have been killed for reporting the news and bringing information to the public, according to a recent report of the UNESCO. This is the recent report, actually, of UNESCO on the topic. In the last 2 years, the number of killed journalists dropped, according to the association, a committee to protect journalism. But it's reasonable to think that attacks on journalists are significantly higher than this. The same organization reports that more than 270 reporters were imprisoned in 2020, which is the highest number for the last 30 years. US Press Freedom Tracker showed in their data that there were more than 430 physical attacks on journalists in the US for the same year, for the 2020. The figure is more than 3 times as many attacks as were reported for the past 3 years combined. So the study claims that reporters and photographers were arrested or charged more than 100 times in the US, 15 times more than the number in 2019, just a year earlier. So the journalists who've been sent to prison now worldwide, their number is 250 journalists are known to be in jail. The top 5 countries where reporters and photographers are sent to prison are China, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Egypt. According to the data of Committee to Protect Journalism, 80 4% of those journalists who've been jailed are covering politics, as you may see. So politics people in power and leaders often use the narrative fake news to point out that the media is not honest and is not reporting the truth. This has strong implementation in the state of mind of the public. Leaders of the countries have the power to be heard and followed by millions of people across the globe. When, for example, the 45th president of the US, Donald Trump, called the media fake news, this was imitated by leaders all over the world. President Trump tweeted a record of more than 630 negative posts about journalists in 2020, the most of his presidency, according to a report of the Reporters Committee to Freedom of the Press. Furthermore, the public starts believing in this and repeating this narrative. More and more often, journalists are threatened verbally from common people while they are doing their job on the field. In some cases across the globe, journalists covering protests, rallies were targeted by mobs because they believe that the reporting was or will be unfair to them. There is a need to understand this trend so that we can anticipate and then address the potential of rising violence across the globe. So the literature review, so I specifically decided to look for these 4 different types of literature review. There have been some significant studies conducted on the rising number of killed journalists around the globe, but fewer about violent attacks on journalists, and did not result in death. Most of the researchers focus on anti-press violence in specific countries or regions like Mexico, Venezuela, Afghanistan, and so on. Fewer researchers explore the violence against journalists and media in countries with strong democracy like the US and countries part of the European Union or globally. In the literature review section, these 4 important aspects are discussed. The first is an overview about the rising attacks and threats on journalists, followed by a discussion on studies on the narrative of the politics used against journalism. And third is studies on how the anti-press discourse towards journalists created mistrust on the media. And the last one is about the threats and violence against journalists in social media. There are some very good studies on that topic as well. So for the discussion, what I want to note is that there is a limitation of the data. There is a number of journalists who were killed, sent to prison and missed, but there is no information about attacks on journalists, physical or verbal. There is a need for more research on the relationship between politicians, critical narratives against journalists, which might lead to distrust towards the media and hate attacks on journalists. There is a need to understand this trend so that we can anticipate and then address the potential for rising violence across the globe. An in-depth and qualitative study could explore the relationship between politics, media, and hate attacks on journalists, which might be conducted as an ethnography approach, which with qualitative interviews with journalists across the globe. That's my references as well that I use so far, some of them that I use so far for my research in progress, as I already mentioned. Of course, as I already said, I think that what would be the next step is conducting a research with a qualitative research with in-depth interviews, which might be ethnography with an ethnography approach as well. I think there is a gap on this field, because as I already mentioned to you, most of the studies that have been done so far are for specific regions with conflict regions like Venezuela, like Afghanistan or Mexico, but regions that with a strong democracy haven't been explored so far and in depth, more especially in this focus with the narrative of politics and how this is related to the attacks of journalists. So this is my study in progress. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you.